When we think about organized crime, our minds often jump to, well, Italian groups or maybe South American cartels, right? Focusing on specific things.
Sure. Those are the classic images.
What if I told you that criminal organizations coming out of Turkey have this incredibly wide-reaching and complex network all across the globe?
It's definitely not what first comes to mind for most people, yeah.
Exactly. So that's what we're digging into today. We've got the source, a really comprehensive overview that kind of maps out the history, the scale, the different activities of what people generally call the Turkish Mafia.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission here for this deep dive is to get past the usual headlines, unpack this whole landscape and really try to understand the mechanics behind it. And frankly, some pretty surprising connections.
This is good. It's a complex picture.
Yeah, think of it as like your quick guide to getting a real handle on a major player in international crime that maybe doesn't get as much spotlight.
And the scale is the first thing that really jumps out. I mean, when you look at where these groups operate, it's not just Turkey.
Right.
You've got huge parts of Western Europe, especially where there are established Turkish communities.
Mm.
Plus, they're really pushing into Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, even the Persian Gulf. It's a truly sprawling network.
It suggests they're not just present, they're actively projecting influence and exploiting opportunities across loads of different countries.
Exactly. It's like a very adaptable, borderless kind of business model, just operating illegally.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. Where did this all start? Our source says things really started to take shape back in the 1970s. In Turkey itself.
That's the time frame, yeah.
The 70s.
But it's not just one single group, is it? It sounds like there were specific areas within Turkey that were more like breeding grounds.
That's a really key point. The overview flags two main spots. One is Trabzon province, that's on the Black Sea coast.
And the other is East and Southeast Anatolia. But it highlights the Black Sea region, especially Trabzon, as a really significant origin point for some very powerful groups. These often included both Turkish and Laz populations.
Laz, that's interesting.
Yeah. So this initial regional focus seems to have been pretty crucial for the early days, their initial growth.
And from there, from those Turkish roots, the expansion is, well, it's kind of staggering. The list of places they operate is massive.
It really is. Do you want to run through some of them?
Yeah, let's see. Turkey, obviously. Then Azerbaijan, Iraq, Germany, Sweden, UK, Russia, Italy, Bulgaria, Albania, Spain.
Keep going.
Kazakhstan, Israel, the Balkans, Turkmenistan, France, Netherlands, Belgium, the US, Switzerland, Norway, Romania. I mean, that covers a lot of ground.
It paints a very clear picture of their international footprint. And like we mentioned, the source links that strong Western European presence directly to the Turkish immigrant communities there.
Which I guess provides a certain level of cover or familiarity.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It could make certain operations easier. But what's also interesting is the growing activity in Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, the Persian Gulf. That shows they're actively expanding, seeking new territories.
Adapting.
Definitely adapting. Though the source does note their presence in the Middle East seems less significant compared to Europe.
Right, so it's not just where they are, but what they're doing. And that list of activities, wow, it's broad.
It's incredibly diverse, isn't it?
Arms trafficking, assassination, assault, bank fraud, blackmail, bribery, car bombing, car theft, contract killing, counterfeiting.
It goes on. Drug trafficking, extortion, forced prostitution, fraud, human trafficking.
Infiltration of politics, illegal gambling, insurance fraud, kidnapping, money laundering, murder, even police corruption and impersonation.
Prostitution, racketeering, tax evasion, theft, witness intimidation, witness tampering. It covers pretty much the whole spectrum of serious organized crime.
It really shows they aren't just specialists in one thing. They're multifaceted.
Absolutely. But the source does really emphasize their international role in drug trafficking. Heroin, particularly.
Ah, yes. That seems key.
There's a specific historical link mentioned with Bulgarian mafia groups. They apparently worked together to distribute heroin into Italy and, further afield. That was a big deal.
Okay, so heroin was historically huge for them. But things change, right? It sounds like they're now making serious moves in the cocaine market, too.
That's a major point in the overview, yeah. It mentions direct involvement in the pipeline from South America to Europe.
Direct involvement.
Yeah.
Not just distribution.
Seems like it. And it even talks about an alleged, very profitable partnership with Venezuela's Cartel of the Suns and also criminal groups in Ecuador.
Wow. Partnering with South American cartels directly, that feels like a significant escalation, moving up the value chain, so to speak.
Definitely. It suggests they're strategically adapting to where the big money is in the global drug trade now. And they're not just sticking to traditional cocaine routes either. The source mentions them expanding into less typical markets for cocaine, like Eastern Europe and the Persian Gulf. It shows they're actively looking for new avenues, new growth areas.
Proactive, ambitious even.
Very much so. It's a sign of how they evolve, moving beyond just heroin to grab a bigger slice of the very lucrative cocaine pie.
Okay, so obviously these groups aren't operating in a vacuum. They must have allies, right? And enemies.
For sure. And the source gives us some insights into that. On the alliance side, it mentions connections with British crime firms.
Okay, like traditional British gangs.
Seems like it. Also, the Albanian Mafia, the Sicilian Mafia Cosa Nostra.
Cosa Nostra again. That keeps popping up.
Yeah, and the source specifically says it's a close relationship, which is quite telling. Then you've got the Azerbaijani Mafia, Pakistani Mafia, Russian Mafia, and even Colombian cartels mentioned, specifically the Sinaloa cartel.
Sinaloa. So links to major Mexican cartels too. That's a powerful network of friends, if you can call them that.
It certainly facilitates their international operations,
Uh.
gives them access, resources, reach.
And who are they bumping heads with? Who are the rivals?
The main rivals listed are the Armenian Mafia, the Greek Mafia, and the Kurdish Mafia.
Okay, so conflicts likely over turf, markets, maybe older disputes too.
Presumably all of the above. Competition is fierce in that world. Understanding these alliances and rivalries is pretty crucial to seeing the bigger international crime landscape.
Now, going back to their activities, it sounds like the focus has shifted over the decades. It wasn't always drugs first, was it?
No, the source traces a kind of evolution. Back in the 70s, a big thing was the weapons trade.
Makes sense, given the political climate back then in the region.
Exactly. Then, starting around the 80s and really continuing right up to today, heroin became dominant. Huge focus there.
And more recently,
More recently, they've also moved significantly into human smuggling, which probably reflects, changing global situations, migration patterns, and the criminal opportunities that come with that.
okay, this next part feels like where things get really complex, maybe even a bit disturbing. The source talks about connections to the deep state in Turkey. That includes the National Intelligence Organization, the MIT, and also the Grey Wolves. What exactly does that mean?
Right, this is a really significant and often controversial aspect. Deep state basically refers to alleged hidden networks, shadowy groups within state institutions in Turkey operating kind of off the books.
Influencing things behind the scenes.
That's the idea. And the connection to the Grey Wolves is particularly highlighted. They're described as an ideological group, very nationalist, with close ties to some mafia outfits.
And used for certain purposes.
Reportedly, yes.
Right.
The source mentions them being used as a tool against Kurdish militants, the PKK. Ideologically, they're described as far-right, radical nationalist, and linked to political parties like the MHP and even the AK party.
Wow. And there's that big scandal, Susurluk. Did that bring this stuff out?
Yes, the Susurluk scandal in the 90s is mentioned specifically. It was a major event that really blew the lid off some of these murky connections between state elements, politicians, security forces, and organized crime. Made it very public.
And it sounds like this isn't just ancient history. The source mentions ongoing links, corrupt politicians, law enforcement connections, especially within immigrant communities abroad, and still tied to groups like the Grey Wolves.
Exactly. It suggests that this entanglement, this blurring of lines between state power, political ideology, and organized crime might be, well, quite deep-seated and persistent.
Which has pretty serious implications for, rule of law, democracy, all of that.
Absolutely. It's a troubling dynamic.
The overview also names some names, specific people and groups. Bekir Salenk, for instance, is mentioned in connection with the plot to assassinate Pope John Paul II.
Yeah, that's a pretty shocking detail, isn't it?
It really is. It just shows the potential reach, the kind of global events these figures could get tangled up in, way beyond just street crime.
A stark reminder, definitely.
And there's a list of other notable figures and groups mentioned, too. Let's see. Nurullah Tevfik Aransoy, the Arif family. Hakan Ayik, Alatin Çakıcı.
Çakıcı. The source notes his links to the Grey Wolves and mentions he was released from prison relatively recently.
Right. Also, Nakati Arabachi, Abdullah Shatla, he was key in the Susurluk affair, wasn't he?
Yes, central figure there.
Nadimi Mek, Dindar Kılıç, Yasar Avni Musululu, Kıştat Yılmaz, Sedat Peker. He's been in the news a lot lately, too, hasn't he?
He has, making various allegations online. And then there's a general mention of Eastern Black Sea crime groups tying back to that regional origin point.
It's quite the gallery, gives a face, or rather multiple faces, to these operations.
It highlights that these aren't just abstract networks. There are powerful individuals, sometimes families, driving them.
One last specific group mentioned. Turkish Cypriot crime groups, but based in London. It says they're into drug trafficking, armed robbery, money laundering, but maybe operate a bit differently.
Yeah, the source makes an interesting distinction. It suggests their style is maybe closer to traditional white British crime firms rather than the broader Turkish Mafia model we've been discussing.
So adapting to the local London scene, maybe?
That's what it implies. It shows how even groups with similar origins can evolve differently depending on where they set up shop and the criminal environment they're in. It's quite insightful.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let's try and crystallize the main points.
Yeah.
What are the absolute key takeaways about these Turkish criminal organizations?
Well, I'd say firstly, their long history, going back to the 70s, and just how incredibly wide their geographical reach is now across Europe and beyond.
Like the scale.
Secondly, the sheer variety of their criminal work.
Mm.
But with a really major and evolving focus on drug trafficking, heroin historically, and now increasingly cocaine.
Okay.
Thirdly, that intricate web of alliances they've built with other major international crime groups alongside their own set of rivals shows how interconnected they are.
Yeah, not operating alone.
And finally, perhaps the most complex point, those significant and, frankly, quite concerning connections to elements within the Turkish state and political system, the whole deep state dimension.
Yeah, that deep state connection. And things like the alleged link to the Pope assassination attempt, that definitely sticks with you. It underlines how serious and potentially far-reaching their influence can be.
Absolutely. It makes it clear these aren't just, local gangs. They are major players on the global stage with links that can stretch into politics, intelligence, and huge international events.
So, thinking about all that, the history, the reach, the activities, these deep-rooted connections, what does this mean looking forward? What are the sort of implications for international security, for law enforcement trying to tackle this?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It really makes you wonder how you even begin to address organized crime when it gets so tangled up with elements of state power in some places. Definitely gives you something to think about long after this conversation ends.